and as a trainer. At the moment, I've muted your microphones so that we don't suffer from too much background noise and feedback. There's a chat box that you can type questions into. It's a little bit difficult for me to read messages and teach at the same time, but if you're experiencing any technical issues, please do type in the box and my colleague from CARBA will do her very, very best to help you. I may ask you to reflect and note down your thoughts from time to time, so it's a good idea to have a pen and paper handy. So I'm just going to leave you a few moments now, just so that you can grab a pen and paper if you haven't got one to hand. Okay, so I can tailor this webinar appropriately. I'm going to start off now with a quick poll, just so that we can find out about your level of knowledge. Now, it would help if my PowerPoint decided that it wanted to go to the next screen. So hopefully that'll come along in just a moment. Okay, so maybe if we could just run the poll while I try to get my PowerPoint to advance, that wanted to advance earlier on but has decided it doesn't want to advance at the moment. So if you can open the poll number 1, please, Kirsty. Okay, 70% of you have voted. I'll just leave it the last few moments in case a few more of you want to vote, and then we'll close the poll. Okay, so I'm just going to close the poll now. So what have we got? 7% of you say, I know nothing about mindfulness. 57% of you have read a little bit about mindfulness, but perhaps never practiced it that much. 11% of you do mindfulness to relax, maybe at the end of an exercise routine. 21% of you have attended mindfulness training and practice it regularly, and 4% of you actually practice quite a lot. So that gives me an idea of how to pitch the session. I'm going to be allowing quite a bit of time for questions and answers, and Kirsty from CARBA is sitting there in the background, so she will be making a note of any questions that you have moving along, and we'll get them answered at the end. But as I say, please, if you're suffering any technical difficulties, do let Kirsty know so that she can try to help you out in the background. So, moving on from there, just wanted to tell you a little bit about CARBA. CARBA are a really amazing organisation. They provide a wide range of services for members, all free of charge. And these services include emotional support. So you don't need to suffer in silence. You can actually speak to CARBA 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by phone, by email, and by live chat. You could receive coaching. A coach can help you to define goals, develop a practical plan, and explore challenges. And you can have 5 of these sessions on phone or video link completely free of charge. Health and carer support. If you're caring for a family member, CARBA can help you to navigate local services which can be complex, such as social services as in the NHS. We can also give you grants and donations, help with home adaptations and specialist equipment, and we can provide counselling and even end-of-life bereavement services. We provide financial assistance. We were originally founded in the late 1880s in order to provide financial support to ICAEW members in need. We provide grants and we provide donations, and it's still a really important part of our work. And these grants and donations can actually include business startup support and relocation grants. We provide debt advice. We can help you to consolidate debts and even negotiate with your creditors. We do a lot of work in career development. This is CARBA's most popular service. CARBA can support you to have the career that you want through our coaching service and through free online face-to-face courses. Legal advice. We offer a legal advice service through our partnership with Law Express, and you can get free independent advice and guidance on any legal queries, including employment law, property law, and your consumer rights. So this is your webinar, and I really want you to make the most of today's webinar, and I'm trying to make it as interactive as it's possible on this technology so that you can get maximum benefit from your time investment. So it would be really great if you could participate as actively as possible in this webinar. So what I'm going to cover today is what is mindfulness, and more importantly, what it's not. Next, we're going to look at focus and attention, because as humans, most of the time our attention is not where we want it to be. So we're going to explore the problem of mind wandering and some possible solutions. If you want to be more productive and less stressed, you need to pay attention to your attention. At its most basic level, mindfulness is an attentional training. You will start training your attention right from today. The human brain hates uncertainty, and when there's no certainty, the brain will try to create a sense of certainty and safety, and in the process it makes up lots of stories. Some of these stories serve us really well, while others are less helpful. What mindfulness does is helps you to observe your storytelling mind and recognize that these stories are not necessarily facts. They're simply a set of thoughts that may or may not be right. Lastly, I'm going to share with you a productivity hack that may well change your life, learning how to maintain your workable range. Your mindfulness toolkit will act as a reminder so that when you leave this webinar with mindful tools and techniques, you can apply them immediately. And as I said earlier, we really have left quite a bit of time for questions at the end, and I'm going to do my very best to answer as many as possible, so please ask away. I hope you enjoy this webinar and find practical ways that work for you to be a little bit more mindful each and every day. So, what do you remember about this morning? You might remember maybe drinking a cup of coffee or tea, eating some breakfast, brushing your teeth, showering, maybe saying good morning to someone. Was your mind full or were you mindful? It's really easy to get hijacked by thoughts unconnected to what's actually happening at this moment. Anxiety, fear, panic, insomnia, isolation, and all sorts of other fears and worries. Whenever you have a thought, it triggers a physical response in the body and emotions, and we're often completely unaware of this, but it's happening, and it's happening each and every day in each and every moment. What mindfulness helps to become, mindfulness is a way of helping us to become more aware of reactive cycles of thoughts, which trigger bodily responses and generate more emotions. And through mindfulness, you can recognize and stop this cycle from escalating out of control. Mindfulness can't change what life throws at you, but it will give you new strategies to deal with them. So, what is mindfulness? There are many, many definitions of mindfulness, and as mentioned earlier, At its simplest level, it's a form of attentional training. It has its roots in Eastern practices, including Buddhism and Hinduism. In the US in the 1970s, Professor John Kabat-Zinn developed mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR for short. Now, initially, MBSR was designed as a treatment for people with chronic pain, but researchers quickly found that there were many more applications. In the 1990s, in the UK, Professor Mark Williams reasoned that if mindfulness reduces physical pain, could it reduce mental pain too, such as depression, anxiety, and stress? So he met with John, he blended MBSR with some cognitive behavioral therapy to form mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, or MBCT for short. It was so successful that it was recognised by NICE, the UK clinical approvals body, as a treatment of choice for recurrent depression. And to date, over 5,000 research studies have now been published on the impact of mindfulness. It's been proven to change the brain for the better, improving productivity at work, employee relationships, and well-being. Over 270 research papers have now been published on the impacts of mindfulness for busy working professionals, and it's now widely taught in the workplace. Early adopters include Google, and now Deloitte, Transport for London, and even Parliament run mindfulness sessions for their staff. Mindfulness helps us to focus attention on the situation in hand and observe the judgments that we often make so very quickly. Developing this ability helps individuals to step away from autopilot, knee-jerk responses, see things from a different perspective, and see things more clearly, and as a result make smarter decisions. In a nutshell, mindfulness allows us to reduce the flow of incoming information, creating a small gap between the stimulus or trigger and our default threat response. So in the long term, chronic stress has a really negative effect on our whole system, including the brain. Brain scans show that over time it can reduce grey matter in the neocortex, an area of the brain responsible for creativity, problem solving, and decision making. It also reduces grey matter in the hippocampus, an area associated with impulse regulation, memory, and learning. It also decreases grey matter in the amygdala, so that you're less likely to have an instinctual fear-based response. A number of research studies using MRI scans demonstrate that mindfulness training can reverse these effects and increase neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to make new connections and to resculpt and basically to work better. The emotional benefits are there too. We can feel calmer with greater activation of the prefrontal cortex, create problem solving, we can do more creative problem solving, planning, and decision making. It improves focus, reduces distraction, spending less energy worrying, and so that we can respond much more constructively. It can increase our resilience, and it can reduce our perception of stress so that we respond differently to life stresses. So now's the time to give mindfulness a little try. Please feel free to download the free CABA guided meditations that I have recorded, especially for CABA, to help you practice at home. In the early days of practicing mindfulness, it's so much easier to have a narrator so that you can just focus on the exercise rather than trying to think hard about what you're supposed to be doing and whether you're getting it right. So I thoroughly recommend using a narration when you practice mindfulness at home, either the ones that I've created for CABA or the numerous versions that you'll see on applications such as Insight Timer or on YouTube. But do be a little bit aware that there's an awful lot of recordings out there in the media purporting to be mindfulness that aren't really mindfulness. So if you do pick something from YouTube, try to pick a really well-known teacher such as John Kabat-Zinn or Mark Williams. So mindfulness of breath is an exercise that we normally teach in week 1 of a 6 or an 8-week mindfulness training program. And the idea of the exercise, and I'm going to guide you through so you won't need to remember this, is that you focus the spotlight of your attention on the physical sensations of breathing. So you focus on the breath coming in, the breath going out. You don't need to change your breathing in any way because your body knows exactly how to breathe. All you need to do is just focus your attention on the physical sensations that occur when you breathe. At some point, your mind will wander. It's absolutely inevitable. At some point, you will recognize that your mind has wandered. And when you do, kindly and gently, you escort your attention back to focusing on the physical sensations of breath. Now, there's nothing particularly magical about breath. It's just, as humans, like any animal, if we're not breathing, we're not alive. So we always have the breath. We can always go back to anchoring our attention on the physical sensations of breathing. It's always there. So that's why we use breath. Occasionally when I teach this exercise, there are some people that don't get on well with focusing on breath. You know, maybe they've had an asthma or a panic attack. So if that's you, don't do it. Well, I want you to breathe, of course, but just pick something else. All you need is a sole one thing, one singular thing to focus on. So it could be how your feet feel in contact with the ground or how your buttocks feel in contact with the chair base. But for everyone else, I'd like to invite you to focus in on the present moment sensations of breathing. So remember, this exercise actually isn't about relaxation. This exercise is about focusing attention, noticing mind wandering, not beating yourself up or giving yourself a hard time, but simply placing the attention back. And that's a little bit like the reps in the gym. So this is the bit that develops neuroplasticity in the brain and hardwires your brain to be able to focus your attention for longer, to notice mind wandering, and to bring attention back to where you want it to be. A lot of people do report that they feel relaxation as a result, and if you do, brilliant. But don't go in with the aim of relaxing, because then if you don't relax or it isn't quite going to plan, you're just applying pressure on yourself, and this will make it even more difficult to focus. So the exercise is as it is. If your mind wanders, it wanders, not a problem. It's the noticing it's wandered and bringing it back that's the key thing. So if you're ready, let's give this short exercise a go. So I'm presuming that most of you are sitting on a chair. So sitting on a chair and adopting a comfortable, upright, open position that embodies your intention to practice mindfulness. Your intention, if you like, to fall awake rather than falling asleep. And if you're happy to do so, close your eyes, or if you prefer, just hold your eyes in soft focus, gazing downwards, just so that you can restrict the flow of incoming information into your brain. So starting off this exercise by directing your attention to your body. So starting off by noticing how your feet feel in contact with the ground, how your buttocks feel in contact with the chair base, how your back feels, how your shoulders feel, how your arms feel, how your hands feel. Noticing how your chin feels, your lips, your nose. And if possible, just getting a sense of how the whole body feels at this moment. No judgment, no right or wrong, just checking in. And now narrowing the focus of your attention to focus as best you can on the present moment sensations of breath. Feeling the breath coming in and the breath going out. Nothing else to do at this moment in time, but focus your full attention as best you can on the physical sensations that arise as the breath comes in and the breath goes out, allowing your breath to fall into its own natural rhythm. No need to change anything. However you're breathing right now is just fine. And if your mind has wandered, that's fine. It's just what minds do. When you're ready to do so, once more, kindly and gently escort your attention back to the breath. Feeling the breath coming in, feeling the breath going out. And now, if you're comfortable to do so, I'd like to invite you to place one hand gently on your tummy. And just use your hand to help you focus your attention on the rising and the falling of the tummy, the belly, with each in-breath and each out-breath. Feeling the breath coming in and the breath going out. And again, if your mind has wandered, congratulations, you've noticed. The main thing now is to just kindly and gently redirect the focus of your attention back to your hand, resting on your belly, focusing in on the rising and falling of the belly with each in and each out breath. And now, if your hand was still resting on your belly, just allowing your hand to go back to rest in your lap. And this time, seeing if it's possible to focus your attention on the short, naturally occurring pause between each in-breath and each out-breath. So no need to change your breathing. All you're doing is noticing that you breathe in, there's a short pause before you naturally breathe out. And just using this pause between the in and the out breath as an anchor for your present moment awareness. And again, if your mind has wandered, it's not a problem. You've noticed. Perhaps noticing where your attention wandered off to and any impacts of your attention wandering. And then once you've checked in and noticed, just let it go and refocus your attention back on the short, naturally occurring gap between each in-breath and each out-breath, feeling the breath coming in and the breath going out. And finally, with a sense of openness and curiosity, focusing your full attention as best you can right at the tips of your nostrils and seeing if it's possible to tune into the really subtle sensations that occur at the tips of your nostrils as the breath comes in and as the breath goes out. So trying to tune into the subtle sensations at the tips of your nostrils. If you can't detect any sensations, that's fine, just draw a blank. The important thing is placing your attention there and with an open mind, just seeing what you can or can't notice. Breath coming in, breath going out. And now as we bring this exercise towards a close, getting a sense of how your whole body feels as you sit in this chair, in this room, in this moment in time. So gently and in your own time, when you're ready, open your eyes, ready for the rest of this session and the day ahead. If you need to, just have a little stretch or a move around or a wiggle, just to come right back into the session. So I'm just going to launch a poll in a moment to debrief the next session. Normally, if we were teaching face-to-face, we'd have a little bit of discussion and reflection time on what you noticed. So hopefully we can achieve some of this via the next poll. So if you can now, thank you very much. We've got poll number 2, open, ready to vote. So 30% of you have voted, 46, 56, nearly 60% now. 61. So just a few of you more to have the opportunity to vote. I'm not sure if you're still meditating and haven't rejoined us, or if you wandered off to make a cup of tea, hopefully not the latter. So 68%. Going to close it in just a moment. And if we close it now, that would be great. Okay, so what have we got? What have we noticed? So no great surprise there. 65% of you noticed that your mind has wandered. Now, I know people who have dedicated their life to mindfulness, and guess what? Although they go on hardcore retreats, sometimes for 2 or 3 years at a time, sometimes a year in silence, their minds still wander. Your minds will wander for the rest of your life. Mind wandering isn't the issue. It's not noticing that your mind has wandered, because most of the time when the mind wanders, we don't notice for quite some time that our mind has wandered away. So I'm not at all surprised. Don't let that put you off. It is the noticing that's key, and that's one of the greatest learnings from this exercise. 35% found it difficult to remain focused. So again, this isn't something that we do every day, is it? Just focus on one thing. In life, we've become very used to focusing on multiple things at one time. And this is known as multitasking, as you know. In fact, multitasking is a fallacy. Multitasking doesn't exist, and it's certainly not more efficient. What the brain actually does is task switches. And with every task switching, it's very inefficient and very energy hungry from a brain perspective. So we end up often losing the thread of what we were doing. So what happens is the brain puts what we're working on into short-term memory. We deal with what's in front of us. We park that in working memory, and then we come back to the thing that we were working on before. So it can be very difficult to remain focused, but I guarantee you, sitting and doing this, even for a couple of weeks, you will start to notice that you remain focused for longer. It's something that you work on for a lifetime, but people notice the difference normally on courses pretty quickly with as little as 10 minutes a day meditation. Around 10% of you worried that you might not be breathing, 6%, I do apologize, that you might not be breathing right. Every time I teach a class, there will be people who get quite concerned that they're either breathing too fast or breathing too shallowly, or should they be controlling it. Actually, mindfulness breath really hasn't got anything to do with the breath. All we're doing is using the breath as an anchor for our attention, so you can't actually get it wrong. And if you think about it, you go to sleep every single day and you wake up and you're still alive, so your body knows exactly how to breathe. So if you're one of those people that worries that you might not be breathing right, don't worry, you can't breathe wrong. Just literally use the breath as an anchor, let go of the sense of trying to control it or judge it, and it's just when your attention is not on the breath, you know it's wandered. That's the only function for the breath. But again, this comes up most times. 23% of you said that your attention was drawn to physical aches and pains. Again, this is really, really common. Often we're so busy during the daytime that we don't notice the messages that the body is sending us. So all day long, the body is sending us messages. And in fact, neuroscience brain scans have demonstrated that bottom-up communication from the body occurs faster than top-down from the brain. So there's two-way communication between the body and the brain. It's not just top-down. And the body will be telling us, there are physical aches and pains, or maybe we need to stretch, or we haven't moved enough, we just don't notice. So when we sit down to meditate, often it's when we notice those physical aches and pains because we were blocking them out or not paying attention to them. So it's really common for this to happen. The trick with it is not to get too drawn in or obsessed by it, but just to notice that you have a physical sensation, to notice and to let it be as it is, and then to bring your attention back to the breath and the exercise. That being said, it's not an endurance test. So if you notice that the way you're sitting, your circulation is cutting off and you need to wiggle or move something, just to bring the blood flow back, by all means do it. But don't use it as something to entertain yourself because you're finding it boring or a little bit dull, just focusing in on the breath. See if you can just sit with the discomfort if you can. But if it goes to what we describe as the hard edge, then by all means do something, move, shift your posture and attend to it. And certainly afterwards, if you know that you've got achy shoulders, spend a bit of time doing some shoulder rolls or something. The body's giving you some intelligence, some information, you might as well use it. And 74% of you felt relaxed at the end, which is really lovely. Mindfulness, as I've said, and I can't emphasize this strongly enough, is not about relaxation. The media assume that the sole aim of mindfulness is actually about relaxation. It isn't. It's an awareness training. It's to make you aware so that you can manage yourself better. But for many, many people, there is relaxation at the end. I can testify that there's a lot of mindfulness sessions when I've been on retreat and on trainer trainings, when it's been anything else but relaxing. My mind is wandering, the room's too hot, too cold, I've got physical aches and pains. And so sometimes it's a little bit of an endurance test, but the trick is to just keep on noticing what's going on, parking it, bringing your attention back, noticing mind wandering, focus and bring it back. And over time, you will develop new neural pathways in your brain that will help you to naturally be more mindful. So thank you very, very much for giving me that feedback. And if there's any questions associated with this exercise, please do ask them at the end as well. So let's move on. So many of you noticed that your mind had wandered. There's a lovely bit of research which you may or may not be aware of by Killingsworth and Gilbert, who set out to discover just how much our minds wander. And they discovered that on average, our mind wanders for around 47% of the day, even more when you're at work. So think of the impact that this is having on your productivity, your career prospects, and even your relationships. Even more worrying is the fact that when our minds wander, they have a tendency to wander onto things that worry or bother us. The really nice things in life often pass us by completely unnoticed. Now, why is this? Because the brain reasons that the nice things in life, such as a beautiful sunset, a lovely meal, somebody saying something complimentary, they're unlikely to harm or to kill us. But in contrast, failing to get out of the way of a speeding car coming towards us or a wild animal running after us, that might kill us. So the brain pays a huge amount of time paying attention to things that it regards as harmful, like an argument with your boss or failing to reach your goals at work. And this over time can give us a somewhat distorted view of our lives and make us feel stressed, anxious, or even depressed. So what mindfulness teaches you to do is to pay more attention to life's little victories, the nice things in life that we experience, and give us a more balanced perspective on our lives. Your mind will probably continue to wander for the rest of your life. So in mindfulness training, the emphasis is not on stopping the mind wandering, but on noticing that it has wandered and sometimes where it wanders to on a regular basis. And when we notice this, we then have a choice about what happens next. When we don't notice, we're on autopilot, and this doesn't always serve us well. So as touched upon earlier, as humans, we spend a huge amount of time on mental time travel into the past and into the future. We don't spend anywhere near enough time in the present moment. You can only step out of autopilot if you know that you're on autopilot. So a really good way to practice the art of stepping into the present moment is to notice some of the things that you tend to do on autopilot with little thought. So I'm wondering, I'm hoping this is possible, Kirsty. Please can you type into your chat box some of the things that you do routinely with little or no attention while your mind is elsewhere. So common examples of this might be eating or showering. What are some of the things that you do on autopilot that perhaps you could do with paying a little bit more conscious attention to? So if it's possible to do this, Kirsty, could you just type in the chat box some of the things that you typically do on autopilot? And then if Kirsty can maybe give me a flavour, I will try to open the chat box for myself too. So we've got driving to work, showering, walking upstairs, yes. Eating, as mentioned, and eating is one that comes up an awful lot on these training courses. Brushing teeth, yep. Cooking, that's an interesting one. Watching TV, yeah. How often do you get to the end of an episode or something and then you can't remember what was going on? Getting the children ready. Now I've got a lovely story about that on one of the earliest mindfulness courses that I taught. There was a very busy lady. She was a consultant in a hospital, and she had 3 children and hubby to get out of the door ready for work before she could leave and lock things up and get on with her day. And so she really automatically gave them a hug. Each morning they came up to her, they wanted a hug from her, and she did this on autopilot, and then sit down and eat your food and brush your teeth and get your bag and off you go to school. And so as a little bit of home practice, she tried, just as an experiment, to actually be in the moment. And so when she noticed that her kids had come for a hug, she just stopped and was in the moment to notice how it felt to be hugged. And she came bounding in the week after, and she said, and this is how she said it, she said, it felt so good. And I said to her, and did your morning take any longer? And she said, no, not a second, but I felt happier. So sometimes, you know, just a little bit of attention to things that you otherwise might do on autopilot and not notice can make a big, big difference to your day. Autopilot is there for good reasons. So when you pay conscious attention to how you do something, it does take more energy and it's a slower process from a brain perspective. But there are so many things that we do on autopilot these days which can bring us joy, which can change the trajectory of the day, and also give us choices in our lives. So I'd like to, just, give you a little opportunity, certainly for the next week, just start to notice some of the things that you perpetually do on autopilot. Somebody mentioned cooking earlier, and cooking can be a source of great joy. Now, for some people, they hate cooking and it's just a chore. But even things like noticing how it feels to stretch and get something off a shelf or out of a cupboard, and how it feels to open it, how it feels to pour, aromas, how it feels to chop, how it feels to stir, different colors. It can bring a whole different experience to the cooking, and it doesn't take a second longer, but it can hugely change your physiology, so the body can become more relaxed because you're not on autopilot worrying about the meeting next week while you're cooking. You're just focusing on cooking. It's much the same as mindfulness of breath. You're just focusing on the breath, and by single tasking, the fret system in the brain can switch down and it changes the experience. But it not only changes the experience, it changes your physiology, so the chemistry within your body. So it's just worth sometimes trying to select some things you normally do on autopilot and doing them with a little bit of mindful attention. You might be quite surprised what happens as a result. So I'm now going to talk to you about a little bit of a story in a moment. We've noticed how much the mind wanders, and that when the mind wanders, it's often not happy mind wandering. So we're going to look at some techniques to help you to manage the mind. And on this slide now, I'm going to read you out 4 sentences. And after each sentence, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to note down on a piece of paper any images or thoughts that come to mind. So, are we ready? You're walking down the street. So just make a note of any images or thoughts that come to mind. You are walking down the street. You see a friend walking on the other side. So note down any thoughts or images. You wave at them. So again, just make a note of any thoughts or images. They walk by without acknowledging you. So again, just reflect on any thoughts or images. So what does this illustrate? What is the impact of this story on your mind? And how does this shape your life? On a bad day, you might think, what did I do wrong? I knew it. Nobody likes me. What the hell is wrong with him? Or she should have waved. What's the point? But on a good day, you might think, beautiful weather. Oh, great. There's Joe. I wonder if he's okay, or I hope he's okay, or I must give her a call this week and catch up. So events are actually neutral. It's our interpretation of them that has an impact on our mind and body. Same event, different mood, different interpretation. So to quote Hamlet from 1603, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Our should and musts are rules that we impose. They are our own personal constructs. So remember that thoughts are not necessarily facts. Mindfully separate facts from your interpretation, the interpretation that you create. In mindfulness training, we say that thoughts are not always facts, they're simply mental events. And by treating thoughts in this way, it gives us greater mental flexibility and greater choices in life. So next, I'd like to share with you this great hack, this great tool. It's called the Workable Ranges model. And when I coach busy managers and leaders, a really common topic of discussion is how to be more productive. And in the past, I used to talk about time management, but nowadays the conversation is around attention management. The debate is no longer time management, it's attention management. Because we still have the same number of hours in each day, and that will never change. So the way to be more productive is to manage our attention so that we remain on task for longer. And this is something that mindfulness certainly teaches you how to do. The workable ranges model is really valuable. We all have a workable range. It's the time when we're productive, we're engaged, we're in a state of flow. And it's represented on this diagram by the green bar in the middle of the diagram. If we experience too much pressure or we have too much on, we move out of our workable range and our performance starts to drop off. So under pressure, people typically respond initially in two very different ways. So some people will become hyper. They become a little or a lot manic. They become wired and twitchy. They get faster. They sometimes almost appear as if they're bouncing off the ceiling. On the other hand, other people may become hypo. They feel exhausted. They can't be bothered. They want to withdraw and sometimes physically shut themselves into another room. They don't want to interact or talk with other people. A few people will become hyper initially, and then they crash down into a state of being hypo and switching off. So the next poll I'd like to run is just deciding on your initial reaction when you're under too much pressure. There's no rights or wrongs, so please be as honest as possible. So Kirsty, if we could open poll number 3, please. So 30% have voted. 50%, 55. 73% of you have voted, so I'll just leave it for another few moments for the last people to have a chance to vote. Okay, so if we could close the poll now, please, and share the results. So we've got 29% of you become hyper and a little bit manic or wired, 10% become hypo and shut down and tired, while 61% of you say that you initially become hyper, but then after a while you go into hypo and try to shut yourself away. So if I go back to the model, the trick to maintaining the workable range is to notice just the second that you're going over the line and out of your workable range and becoming slightly hyper or slightly hypo. So for those of you who voted initially hyper but then hypo, it's hyper that you go to first. So in reality, it's 60, 70, 80, so about 90% of you, the first thing that happens when you're leaving your workable range is that you initially become a little bit hyper. So the framework for recognizing that you're becoming hyper is thoughts, emotions, physical sensations and behaviors. So thoughts, emotions and physical sensations are absolutely integral to mindfulness training. You know, any moment you should be able to, after a little bit of practice, tap into your inner resources and notice, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's my emotional state? And having checked in, you can then make a wise decision about what happens next rather than being on autopilot. So the way to use this tool is, you may be able to reflect on it now, but this is something that people tend to reflect on over a slightly longer period of time. Thinking about the last time, you know, that you became just a tiny bit stressed, just as you started to leave that zone of productivity, the workable zone, what were the thoughts that you were having? What were the specific emotions? What did you notice in your body? And what was your behavior? So if other people have been observing you, how much you've been behaving. So I'm just going to put a few examples in here to give you an illustration. So we'll go with the hyper here. So you might be thinking, it's not fair, I'm never going to get it done, I'm not going to meet the deadline. Emotionally, you might feel panic or anger or frustrations rather. In your body, you might notice that perhaps your shoulders are tense, or you're clenching your jaw, or your heart's pounding a little bit faster. And the behavior might be, tapping the desk, or even thumping the desk, or getting up and walking around and you just can't find things, and stomping around and putting things down. So that's just an example. But the trick to maintaining the workable range, everyone thinks we just go through the day like this, but actually, you know, we tend to do this throughout the day. So if you want to remain productive for longer, don't worry about feeling stressed or becoming a little bit hyper or a little bit hypo. The trick is to notice just as you're going over the line before you become completely hyper and you're not thinking straight and you just can't see it, in which case, you know, when you get to this area of the diagram or the bottom, you might need a week off work, you know, to get yourself back to the workable range. But if you notice just here, it might be just a very quick mindful technique. It could be as simple as, you know, a mindful cup of tea, a mindful glass of water, a mindful snack, a quick mindful walk. And we're talking here 1 or 2 minutes. We're not talking sitting down and meditating for a long period of time. In fact, you don't even need to meditate. It's just something where you have a single point of focus so that your brain can calm itself down. It can come out of parasympathetic nervous system and go back into sympathetic and reset the system so that rest, repair, everything's fine is going on, and just resetting everything and getting everything back right. So the more you start noticing, what am I thinking, what are my emotions, what's going on in my body, what's my behavior, and use these as cues to help you recognize when you're going a little bit red or a little bit blue, the quicker you come back into this workable range state. So the next thing I'm going to do with you is a little exercise called the 3-step breathing space. And this is probably the most popular technique that you actually use on the job at work. So from a mindfulness perspective, everyone thinks that mindfulness is often just about, you know, the longer mindfulness exercises such as mindfulness of breath, but this short mini mindfulness technique is really easy to slip into your day, either while you're sitting at your desk. You don't have to close your eyes, you can just have your eyes in soft focus gazing downwards, and maybe people will think you're just staring at your computer. I do know people who remove themselves even to a toilet cubicle or go somewhere quieter if they can. But most people find many opportunities to fit this into a day. I've got psychotherapists and coach friends who use it between clients, people just before they go into an important meeting just to focus, or the minute that you feel that you're, you know, a little bit outside your workable range. So 3-step breathing space, because it's got 3 distinct phases. The first step is just checking in. So checking in, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's my emotional state? It isn't about changing it or judging it. It's just checking in and getting a snapshot of how things are in this present moment. Next, we narrow the focus. So you have a present moment focus on sensations of breathing, and this interrupts the brain's narrative and helps everything to calm down just a little bit. As mentioned earlier, if for any reason focusing on breath is not good for you, equally well focus on how your feet feel in contact with the ground or how your bottom feels on the chair base. You just need a single point of focus. And lastly, just having a present moment awareness of how you're feeling in this moment, ready for the rest of the day so that you can make a wise decision about what to do next. So it's a little mindful pause or punctuation mark in your day. So I'd just like to guide you through this short exercise so that you get an experience of how it works. So for the last time today, if you'd like to once again just settle yourself into your chair and try to adopt that comfortable, upright, open position that just embodies your intention to practice mindfulness. So your intention to fall awake, not to fall asleep. And if you're happy to do so, close your eyes, or if you prefer, holding your eyes in soft focus, gazing downwards is absolutely fine too. And starting off with step 1 of the breathing space, just checking in. What are you thinking at this moment? Just observing your thoughts as mental events. No need to fix them or get hooked up in them, just noticing that they're there. And next, just checking in with your emotions. Are you experiencing any emotions, good, bad, or indifferent? No rights or wrongs, just noticing if they're present. Just allowing them to be as they are. And next, checking in with your body. Are you holding any aches and pains? And if you are, maybe just move your body a little bit and let the tension go. Just releasing any tension if it's easy for you to do so. Some people find it easy to breathe into the area of tension on the in-breath and just let the tension go on the out-breath. And next, narrowing the focus of your awareness to focus in on the present moment sensations of breath. Feeling the breath coming in and the breath going out. Letting your breath fall into its own natural rhythm and just using the breath as an anchor for your present moment awareness. Feeling the breath coming in feeling the breath going out. And now once more, widening the focus of your awareness and starting off by noticing any sounds surrounding you. So sounds within the room, sounds outside the room, sounds outside the building. And again, just notice their coming and going, the loudness or the softness, the sounds within sounds, without attaching any meaning or making any judgment. Just tuning into sounds. And finally, widening your awareness further to get a sense of how your whole body feels as you sit in this chair, in this room, in this moment in time. And when you're ready to do so, if the eyes were still closed, opening the eyes once more, ready for the rest of the day ahead. If you need to, just have a little move or a stretch. So people often make the mistake of thinking that mindfulness and meditation are the same thing, but actually they're not. A core component of mindfulness training are some very specific meditation-based exercises. Mindfulness training blends these with psychological education and little acts of everyday mindfulness. And it's these elements combined that help you to understand and manage yourself better and structurally change the brain for the better. So short everyday mindfulness exercises like this can make a huge difference. This technique is a really good example of everyday mindfulness. So the next time you're starting to go out of your workable range or you just need a mindful pause in a day, do try this. So next, I'm having trouble with a sticky computer that doesn't seem to want to go on to the next slide. I'm going to just go through a little mindfulness toolkit for you now the computer's decided to agree with me. So here are 8 things that you can do immediately after this workshop that will help you to bring a little bit of mindfulness into your day. So firstly, set an intention to be mindful. So mindfulness researcher Sean Shapiro said that there were 3 elements to mindfulness: intention, attention, and attitude. So either set an intention to be more mindful at the beginning of the day, to be more present, to be more aware of what is really unfolding in the present moment, as opposed to your story of what's going on. Or if you're sitting down to do a mindfulness practice like mindfulness of breath or body scan, then at the beginning of sitting down to do the exercise, set an intention to be present and to be aware and to focus your attention as best you can. You'll be amazed at the difference that setting an intention makes. In fact, I've written a whole book on the subject of intention. It's a really important thing. It can really help you to be more mindful. Second tip, step out of autopilot. Of course, that's easier said than done, but the more you try to notice when you're in autopilot, the quicker it comes to step out, so that you can pay conscious attention to the things that it's important to pay attention to, such as perhaps a conversation with a loved one, rather than being on your mobile phone or thinking about the meeting or what you're cooking for dinner. Just try to actually be in the moment. So try to find as many opportunities as you can to step out of autopilot and to be more present and more aware and more alert to what's going on. Try to avoid over striving. Now, striving isn't a bad thing. Striving for achievement, to make things good, for higher performance is great. But what a lot of people end up doing is over striving. So we put ourselves under too much pressure, and actually instead of our performance improving, our performance goes down. So start to notice when you're putting too much pressure on yourself, and just take your foot off the gas a little, and you'll be surprised that you will probably achieve more than you achieved when you were putting yourself under that much pressure. So just start off by noticing, am I striving or am I overstriving? Is this helping me to be productive, or is this pushing me out of my workable range? And if it is, cut yourself some slack. The important thing that you've done is notice, and just pull back a little bit, and you'll be surprised at how efficient you become. Number 4, just allowing things to be as they are. So often we find it difficult to just let things be. And in life, we need to pick our battles wisely. We have a finite amount of energy. So sometimes just allowing things to be as they are, accepting them, just allows you to park them and to move on and to use your energy on things that are worthy of your energy. So sometimes, you know, things aren't as you'd like them to be, but that's just how they are in this moment. So try to practice just allowing some things to be as they are, not good, not bad, just as they are. And in that way you park and you move forward. Number 5, remembering that thoughts are not necessarily facts. They're simply mental events that come and go that we create. And if you can start observing some of your thoughts as mental events, it's going to give you greater cognitive flexibility, because you can step away from them if they're wrong. Failure to do this, we have a thought, we think, oh my God, this is going to go horribly wrong. And then we treat this thought as a fact. And then our brain starts to look for evidence it's going to go wrong. We become more convinced it's going to go wrong, and it goes wrong as a result. So if you can try to practice this little bit of flexibility, that thoughts are not necessarily facts, they're mental events. They may be right, they may be wrong. You'll be surprised again at the impact that this can have in your life. Number 6, taking a mindful break. And often when you're really busy, the last thing that you think that you need to do is to take a break, because you've got a tight deadline, you need to get things done. But actually, when you're coming out of your workable range, the harder you push yourself, the more you enter what Yerkes Dobson call the zone of delusion. And the zone of delusion is the bit where you're working harder and harder and harder. So maybe you're becoming a little bit more manic or a little bit more hypo, but actually in reality, your performance is dropping off. So just start to notice when it's time to take a mindful break. And that 2 or 3 minutes that it takes will more than be repaid in additional productivity over time. Number 7, take a mindful walk. Now, a lot of my friends, and maybe you're included here, have been taking more walks recently and noticing some of the joys that you see in nature or urban landscapes, things that you've never noticed before. So when you take a mindful walk, you don't have to close your eyes and you don't have to walk ridiculously slowly. But the idea is you try to single task. So you're not taking a walk and talking to somebody on a mobile phone or checking social media or having a conversation. You are just walking. You're noticing how it feels to walk. You're noticing the texture of the surface that you're walking on. You're noticing the smells, the sight, the light, the colours. So it's just another way to squeeze a little bit of mindfulness into your day, because if you're going to go for a walk anyway, you might as well make it a mindful walk and double the benefits. And lastly, but very importantly, check in. Are you wired? Are you tired? Or are you in your workable range? And the aim is to stay in that green zone for as long as possible. So just checking in throughout the day. Are you wired? Are you tired? Or are you in your workable range? And if you're not in your workable range, decide on a wise strategy to help you get back into your workable range. So hopefully you'll all find at least one of those things, if not many of the things, that you can apply immediately to add a little bit of mindfulness into your day. So the next steps, if you're interested, if you do want to develop mindfulness a little bit more, you could take an online mindfulness course such as MBSR, MBCT, or the workplace version called Workplace MT. If you prefer self-guided learning, you could get a book, and there are many really great books on mindfulness now, and the two that I'd recommend: Mindfulness, A Practical Guide to Finding Peace in a Frantic World by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. It has a full course in it, an 8-week generic course, which you can follow. Excuse me. Thank you. Or you could do the Mindful Leadership for Dummies. It's actually, this book is for any busy working professional, and it's got the 6-week Workplace MT course and the MP3s with it. You could also try an app. A lot of people swear by Headspace. There are some really good mindfulness apps here that just remind you to be mindful and give you some techniques to anchor onto. You could look on YouTube or other video platforms and maybe look at some of the John Kabat-Zinn guided mindfulness series. Carver have a number of MP3s which you can use too. And most importantly, practice, practice, practice. Make a habit of mindfulness. The good news is that you don't have to practice for hours on end. So up until fairly recently, it was thought that you needed to practice for 20 or 40 minutes a day. Recent research says that busy working professionals get huge benefits from practicing for 10 minutes plus a day. So 10 minutes is all it needs, and most people can squeeze 10 minutes into their day. So thank you very much for your attention. It's time now for some questions and answers. So I know that Kirsty has been collecting some questions as we've been going along, but now is the time to write into your chat box any questions that you would like me to answer. Kirsty, are there any questions that you've gathered? Okay, so questions are just starting to come through now. I can see that there are some questions coming through. In fact, quite a lot of them. Just waiting for a few final ones to come through. So we've got one from Roz, and it says, I have an irresistible urge to sleep whenever attempting mindfulness. So there's a couple of potential answers to this question. Happy to talk about this offline as well if you need some help that I can't offer within this call. So the first and most obvious is when we stop and, in quotes, do nothing, as we do in a mindfulness practice, often it's an opportunity for the body to tell us, I am tired, I need sleep, I haven't been getting enough sleep. And sometimes that urge to sleep just overtakes. So it's really, really common for people to notice sleepiness when they try to attempt a mindfulness practice. And if it's any consolation, again, when I've been on teacher training retreats and advanced courses, if you have a room of 30 mindfulness teachers and they do the body scan exercise, I can virtually guarantee that you'll get at least 2 of them who will fall asleep and start snoring. So it is really common. So the trick of this is just to start to break the association in your mind between mindfulness and sleep. So there are a number of ways that you can do this. The first one sounds a bit strange, but you can stand up. So if you start to feel sleepy, why not stand up and try to meditate standing up? and this can bring a sense of wakefulness and certainly shift things in the brain. Another technique, which again sounds silly, but it works really well, you stick an arm up. And basically, as you fall asleep, the arm drops, and as it drops, you start to wake up. So that can be another way. And the third technique is just opening your eyes a tiny amount. So not enough so that you can start to take in stimulus through the eyes, but just enough for a little bit of light to again give a sense of wakefulness. So do give those a try and see how you get on with those. So there we go. I'm just moving down them a little bit. And thank you to Cheryl, who said no questions, but she really enjoyed it. We've also got Susan, does mindfulness help with depression? Yes. There is a really robust evidence base for MBSR and MBCT, which are both clinical approaches to teaching mindfulness, reducing anxiety, depression and stress. In fact, to such an extent that MBCT became approved as a treatment of choice for people with recurrent depression. So it has a very, very good track record. And for anyone with clinical anxiety, depression or stress, I would really recommend a clinical version of mindfulness training, so MBSR or MBCT, as opposed to a workplace version like Workplace MT, which is shorter, much more succinct, and very pacey. So do give that a go if you'd like. So again, if you need any help or advice, just let me know and I can pass things on. You'll be able to share. Yeah, will you be able to share the link? Yes, Kirsty will be sharing the link to the session afterwards. Is there a role for mindfulness in breaking bad habits? Yes, there certainly is. Do look at some of the information on the internet about habit formation. So a lot of it, in order to break a habit, you need to know that you have a habit. So when I talked about on the slide about autopilot and noticing some of the things you habitually do on autopilot, this is actually a way to change habits. So it's a way of bringing awareness to things that you are not normally aware of. So over time, you can certainly change habits. Now, obviously, they can get very hardwired into the brain, but the very first step is noticing what's going on and then setting an intention to do things differently. So there's certainly, again, a robust evidence base between practicing mindfulness and being able to change habits. How would you advise discussing your workable range with your boss? Now, this is a great question. The workable ranges model was actually developed by a friend of mine who works at Leeds University for this very purpose, to make discussing what's going on for people easier. So you'll notice that there's no mention of the word stress on the workable ranges model. It's just, are you in your workable range or are you becoming hyper or hypo? So the whole conversation becomes a lot easier, and it's a fantastic team tool. So ideally, you know, if you either one-to-one discuss with your boss, look, here's this model, it's based on robust evidence, this is where you want me to be in the green. At some points I become a little bit red, and if you've got a good relationship with your boss, you can say, you will notice me doing, and you can use the framework of thoughts, emotions, physical reaction or behaviors. If you notice me doing this, suggest I go out for a cup of tea or whatever. But I've seen this work really, really well as a team building tool, because people start to use the language of, I'm going a bit red, I'm going a bit blue, or they notice that their colleague typically goes blue when under pressure, and they see the signs and they do something to help them back into the green. So it's certainly a great tool for a discussion with the boss, but ideally as a whole team discussion tool. Let's see, could you advise? Right. Yeah, so is it better to do this in the morning when the minds are clearer? Well, this varies hugely from person to person. So some people are morning people, some people are evening people. So I would just say go with the time that's right for you. What I would not normally recommend is very last thing at night, especially if you decide to sit or lie in your bed doing it, because what does your brain associate the bed with? Sleeping. So normally very last thing at night isn't great, but there isn't any empirical research that says that morning is better than afternoon. Personally, the time when I do it is what I call the segue between work and home. So it's when I finish my work for the day. In the days when I was going out and about a bit more than I am now, it was when I took off my work clothes, put on my evening clothes. I'd sit down for around 10 minutes then. So experiment, play about, see what works best for you. Using mindfulness for dealing with intense anger and rejection. So again, it's about this isn't easy. So this isn't a beginner's technique. This is something after a little bit of practice. So you remember we have the framework of thoughts, emotions, and physical reactions. So firstly, it's about seeing patterns. So when you have this thought, maybe it triggers this emotions and it leads to this physical response. And if you can start to observe the interplay between thoughts and emotions and physical responses, then you can start to gain some detachment and create a little bit of a gap between the stimulus and the response, meaning you're less likely to have a really intense reaction. But there's also a heavy dose of self-kindness that needs to come into this, because if you get annoyed or frustrated that you're reacting in this emotional way and you don't want to react in this emotional way, all it's doing is triggering your threat response further, which means that it's much more difficult to pay conscious, objective attention to what's going on. So just start off by noticing patterns and being able to distance yourself from them. But to be honest, this comes with a bit of practice. So practice some mindfulness 10 minutes a day, and you start to be able to just move away and observe things rather than getting sucked into reactive cycles. So the answer is yes, but it isn't instant. It takes a bit of practice. Is it okay to use mindfulness to get to sleep? Textbook answer versus non-textbook answer here. So in mindfulness, classically, it's about falling awake. It's not about falling asleep. And as we reflected on earlier, some people do find that they get very sleepy when they start to practice mindfulness for all sorts of reasons. So in classical format, don't try to conflate the two, because then your brain quickly associates mindfulness with falling asleep, and then you're not training your attention to, so you're missing out on a lot of the things that mindfulness trains you to do. That being said, in a pragmatic way, I also teach sleep workshops for CABA and other organisations. And if you're chronically lacking in sleep, then that tends to override just about anything. And sleep is so important for our health. So my suggestion would be there are a few adaptations of mindfulness techniques which can be great for getting to sleep. And as long as you don't conflate them in your brain, so your brain doesn't associate, oh, we're doing that mindfulness stuff, so it's time to sleep. If you just have separate meditations that you do to help you get to sleep, one of the very best ones for sleep is an adaptation of the body scan exercise, which is typically taught in week 2. The body scans I mentioned earlier, even really experienced people I've seen falling asleep in a body scan exercise. And in fact, the Mindfulness in Schools project have done an adaptive version of the body scan and called it Beditation, and it's used specifically for that technique. So the idea is that you're getting to bed, you lie, you're ready to go to sleep, but instead of thinking I've got to sleep, you just let go of the idea of sleeping and you focus your full attention on body parts. So starting off with the toes, and go really slowly through the body in minute details. So it might be the big toe, the space between the big toe, the next toe to the little toe, the sole of the foot, the tendons on the top of the foot, the ankles, and then you can either do one leg and then the other leg, or side to side, one foot, the other foot, one lower leg, but do it really, really slowly. If your mind wanders, notice, let go of the idea of sleeping and just bring the attention back to the body part. And it doesn't matter if the mind wanders a million times, you bring it back. And often people find when they do a body scan really slowly in that way, that before they get to the middle of the body, they've dropped off to sleep. But if you go into the exercise saying, I'm doing this to sleep, I'm doing this to sleep, then you're putting pressure on yourself and actually you're less likely to sleep. So I hope that answers the question. How are we doing for time? We've got to end in a few moments. I really enjoyed the session, would like to take a further course. There will definitely be more courses in future, but if you're eligible, you can also ask for one-to-one coaching with me or one of the other CARBA coaches qualified in mindfulness, and we can take you in your coaching sessions through pretty much a full program. So that's another way of doing it, or pick up a book, or wait until CARBA do some more face-to-face courses. Yeah, more people. So there was a reminder of mindfulness people available on the internet. So John Kabat-Zinn is the classic. He is known as the father of modern day mindfulness. Mark Williams, Danny Penman, Vidyamala Birch, anything from the Mindfulness Association, Sharon Salzberg, they're all good people to use as narrators for mindfulness practices. So thank you for an excellent webinar. I've done your full course and summary points anyway, so that's great, starting to practice again. So I think that's the majority of the questions answered, and we're just running short of time now. So I'd like to thank you all for being so open and participating as fully as you can do in this forum, and wish you a great rest of the day. Keep in contact if we can help you at CARBA. You know, CARBA are a fantastic organisation. They do so many things. And, you know, do ask CARBA if you would like any help or advice or any support. So thank you very much and goodbye for now.